Fujifilm has really found a groove lately, having released multiple APS-C mirrorless cameras that beat its rivals, especially Sony. It aims to continue that dominance with the X100V, the latest in its line of famous fixed-lens compact street photography cameras. Fujifilm is not messing around with this model. It has an all-new 26.1 megapixel sensor and processor that's borrowed from the X-Pro3. You also get a much sharper lens, a new OLED electronic viewfinder, and a tilting rear display. It even does 4K video well, which is rare for a compact camera. With all this good new stuff and Fujifilm's street photography savoir-faire, I'm expecting a lot, especially considering the exorbitant price. Now I'm going to take it around the streets of flooded Paris and in the French countryside to see if it lives up to that expectation. The X100V has a lightweight, good-looking body that's easy to carry while giving off strong professional vibes. Street photography requires quick setting changes, and the full complement of manual controls makes that easy. Fujifilm has simplified it compared to the last model by removing the D-pad controller. I didn't really miss that, as the joystick has made it redundant. You also don't need it as much because Fujifilm has introduced touchscreen control. That lets you set focus points and dive into menus to change things like the film simulations. It also supports the swiping functions Fujifilm first introduced on the X-T3. Many photographers prefer buttons to screens, but overall I like what Fujifilm has done here. The display also tilts now, so it's much easier to use this camera to shoot street photos from the hip or up high. The hybrid viewfinder is larger than before and has a 3.69 million dot OLED display that's easier on the eyes. The optics have also been improved on the optical viewfinder. I didn't use that much on the X-Pro3 because I found it impractical on an interchangeable lens camera. However, it works perfectly with the fixed lens on the X100V. It now has aluminum instead of magnesium top and bottom plates and is the first in the series with weather sealing. That's key for a camera designed to be used outdoors. In other regards, the X100V looks and handles the same as previous X100 models. The battery is identical, but endurance has improved to 420 shots with the optical viewfinder. It supports just a single memory card, but at least it's a fast UHS 2 slot. Other features include a 2.5mm mic jack that requires an adapter for any professional mic. You also get mini HDMI and a high-speed USB-C port that doubles as a headphone jack. The X100V now uses the 26.1 megapixel sensor and X-Processor 4 found on the X-T3 and X-Pro3. That means it also shares the stellar performance characteristics of those models. You can shoot bursts at up to 11 frames per second with the mechanical shutter or 20 frames per second with the electronic shutter. Better still, the phase detect autofocus system can keep up with those speeds in continuous AF mode. For example, with the subject moving toward me at a brisk pace, most of my shots were in focus, even very close up. Fujifilm has also improved the face and eye tracking compared to the X100F. However, it still had trouble if the subject wasn't very close to the camera or wore glasses. Speed-wise, it's not as fast or accurate as Sony's compacts like the RX107. The X100V lacks any image stabilization, so you'll need reasonably fast shutter speeds when shooting handheld. That said, street photo subjects often move and image stabilization doesn't help there. With an all-new 23mm f2 lens and higher resolution sensor, images from the X100V are very noticeably sharper than before. As I've seen with Fujifilm's other cameras using the same sensor, other qualities are equally excellent. Fujifilm has the best color science for skin tones, bar none, and colors look rich and natural across the board. Raw photos retain plenty of highlight and shadow detail that can be recovered in extreme lighting situations. If you nail the exposure, you can easily use JPEGs straight out of the camera without any editing needed whatsoever. The X100V is obviously not as good as full-frame cameras in low light, and it's not as good as Sony's a6600 either. However, considering that it has a little bit more resolution than that camera, quality is very acceptable at high ISOs. As I've said before, Fujifilm's simulations are no joke. The X100V has the same ones as the X-Pro3, including the new monochromatic color and classic color simulations. With the quality of those and Fujifilm's JPEGs, street shooters can keep post-processing to a bare minimum. The X100V is now the best compact camera on the market for video. For starters, you can shoot 4K at up to 30 frames per second and 1080p video at 120 frames per second. Video autofocus is much improved, tracking faces and subjects with decent accuracy. However, it doesn't hold up well compared to the autofocus in Sony's a6600 or the Canon Z50. You can also shoot using Fujifilm's f-log profile to max out the dynamic range. I can see it being a great choice for discreet street videography because you can take it into places you'd never try with a bigger camera. The lack of in-body stabilization means shooting handheld is a challenge, and I wish that Fujifilm had used a regular 3.5mm microphone input that doesn't require an adapter because the built-in microphone quality is poor. Fujifilm has spent years perfecting the X100 series, and users already loved the handling, design, and image quality. With the X100V, however, Fujifilm has really lapped the competition by improving this camera in almost every feasible way. It has more resolution and even lovelier image quality. And now, the camera is sharper by far than it's ever been because of the fantastic new 23mm f2.0 lens. The tilting screen makes street photography much easier. It's now weather sealed, and it's a much better video camera to boot. The X100V really has no peers unless you want to spend a lot more money on Leica's $5,000 Q2 or the $2,400 Sony RX1. More realistically, Ricoh's $900 GR3 has an APS-C sensor with a fixed 18mm f2.8 lens. In fact, your best bet as an option to the X100V is Fujifilm's X100F, which can now be found for $1,100. Considering the extra features on the X100V though, I'd consider digging up an extra $300 to get that model instead. If you're into travel or street photography, it simply can't be beat. If you enjoyed this video, click on subscribe, and for more on cameras, check out Engadget.com.